the ones who don't run with the popular crowd, the ones who get caught reading under their desks, the ones who feel like they never get invited, included, or represented. Get your leathers. We have dragons to ride.
Yes, we do. Welcome to my first reading vlog. I love watching these and I have always wanted to make my own, and with the release of Onyx Storm, it felt like the perfect time. Over the next several days, we are going to read the book together and I'm going to react to it in real time. Now, I primarily make witchcraft content, witchy lifestyle content, but I want to branch out this year, and I figured that there is a huge overlap between that, the community I already have, and folks who read fantasy. I had so much fun reading Fourth Wing. Iron Flame, not as much, but I have really anticipated Onyx Storm. I hope this video feels like reading a book with a friend. I cannot wait to discuss it with you. And there's nothing like book releases. Being excited about the next chapter in a tale with a bunch of other people is one of my favorite feelings. Though just before we begin, theories. Really fast, I'm going to put all of mine on the screen and go over them super shortly. There's going to be a betrayal, and I've got 3 names that I think could be it. The betrayers being Brennan, Bodhi, and Imogen. Some big ones about Violet. 1, she's part venom. 2, she's part dragon. 3, she's a necromancer. And if you're listening to me speak and wondering what the heck is this person talking about, I think it's funnier if I don't tell you. These are theories with 0 context. If you know, you know. But if anyone absolutely needs context for these and I don't cover them throughout reading this book, because I guessed correctly because I am an oracle, ask down below and I will explain. Similarly, Lilith, Mama Sorengale, turned venom while she was delivering Violet in order to live through childbirth, and that is what turned Violet into part venom. Lilith was full venom in my brain. I also believe we're going to find out not all venom are bad. Mama Sorengale was one. The venom have infiltrated Basgiath, and they are in the scribe quadrant. Also, immediately, I'm going to pronounce everything probably wrong. But I am listening to the audiobook, and I'm repeating that, so Jack Barlow is not going to die again. We aren't done hearing from Liam. He's going to play a role in this from death. Specifically, I think it's because Liam could see the future, and the little dragon figurines that he made, they are going to come into play. Dane is going to become romantically involved with someone so different than him, a Griffin rider, and we are going to see him go on a really powerful arc through the story. He was already redeemed within Iron Flame, in my opinion, though I should say I am a Dane sympathizer. I know. While I'm at it, I should tell you that I don't love Xaden and I don't think he's endgame. If any of that was too much for you, you should leave now. But I'm telling you, we're not getting endgame in a 5-book series immediately. Also, the way that they miscommunicate, I have a headache already. So without further ado, let's see what awaits in the 3rd installment in the Empyrean series. Right now, I need to make dinner, so I'm gonna do that while I begin the first chapter. Okay, so we're off to a weird start. Mama Sorengale died at the end of the last book, and this one begins very abruptly following those events. Violet has this tunnel vision for Xaden because he turned venom at the end of the last book. I get it, tensions are really high, but Indarna, her dragon, is like, you can grieve your mother. And Violet is like, if I mourned every loss, I wouldn't have time to do anything else. Okay. Indarna and Violet are talking about how they don't want Mira, Violet's sister, to find out that Xaden channeled from the earth, because otherwise Mira will just kill him. Big sister vibes. Zayden is in some sort of interrogation room with Jack Barlow, and Jack knows that Zayden channeled. Violet is eavesdropping on their conversation and thinking about a cure. Zayden is Venom because he channeled to save Violet, and now she is going to do anything she can to save him. What is Violet's first thought when she realizes that Jack Barlow knows Zayden's secret? Kill him. Do you know how funny it would be if she kills him and he doesn't die again immediately? Violet is racking her head for the one person she can trust, and the end of the prologue is, I need Imogen, and I feel like the exact opposite is going to happen. Why? Imogen has an orange dragon. That's suspicious. Everyone with that? Evil. We jumped forward 2 weeks. Okay, so Sawyer lost his leg in the last book. In the battle where Navarre and Promille fought together. Also, the royals are doing some sort of like peace treaty between these two groups. That's being solved. And now Violet and friends are with Sawyer in the infirmary, who is healing. The first lead that Violet has for a cure is finding more of Andarna's kind, and it seems like she's getting a group together to do so. Since the events of the last book, everybody has been out looking for Venom, and I think they killed like 33 of them. But things have gone quiet, and they don't know where they are. They think maybe they got them all. Violet and friends were in the infirmary when they hear a scream. She rushes outside. The infirmary doors are wide open. One of the students has a gray handprint on his neck and says, she's dead, they're all dead. And then Violet tells us that the reason they couldn't find Venom is because they were already inside. And I bet they are the scribes. I was right. Every bed in the overflow infirmary, this is like a healing war zone, has a desecrated corpse in it. The venom got to them all. Violet and friends are running out. They see a scribe come towards them. The scribe puts his head down, spider web red eyes, and she's stabbing him. I just knew it was the scribes. It's the only place that they could hide and get away with it because the scribes wouldn't know what they were looking for. Now, the scribe venom are racing down to the interrogation room where Jack and Zayden are. Are they gonna steal them? Violet and the gang are down there. One of the venom disappears. They've learned new moves. They're fighting and the venom is trying to kill everyone but Violet. One of them says, not the silver-haired one, we need her. Okay. Darkness fills the room, kills all of the enemies, and then caresses her chin like that. Shadows fall. He looks her in the eyes. Violence. Why is it always you? We begin with Violet going to the Cenarium. There are 6 provinces in Navarre, so there are 6 nobles for each one, and they are all dukes and duchesses. This meeting is regarding finding the 7th dragon breed. The nobles want Professor Grady to lead the search, but Violet doesn't want that, and she and Andarna want to pick who's on the search team. Besides that, this assembly is mainly a peace talk, trying to figure out what to do between the dragon riders, both the ones that rebelled, the ones that stayed at Bethskyeth, and the griffin riders, who were enemies for a really long time. Now they're all under the same roof and they're trying to figure out what to do with them. Though as she's leaving, Llewellyn grabs her and gives her a private missive with Plan B. We don't know what that is yet. Then Violet goes back to the bedroom where we get our first spicy scene. And Zayden lights the headboard on fire and leaves in the middle and says he needs space, which we find out is because he started draining the life out of the headboard. I thought venom could only eat like alive things like people, animals, plants, but apparently you could sustain yourself with a headboard if desperate times. Anyway, what's important is that he did it without choice, and it just happened. So that's frightening because we don't want him turning more venom. Later, Mira shows up with a nullified rune. Basically, she's found a way to alter the magic without dismantling it, which is what they need for the Griffin Flyers to stay at Bathskyeth, because they can't use their powers and they feel defenseless. Figuring out how to do this is like a secret project of hers, and I'm pretty sure it ties into Plan B. Cut to the gathering hall. All the riders start to leave except for the Oration riders, the rebels, and it is because the Bathskyeth kids that didn't rebel are messing with a Griffin rider in the courtyard, which is really bad because if anyone hurts each other, the peace talks are not going through. These are three very different groups. The original Bathskyeth kids are still full of propaganda and they're like murderous raving lunatics. The ones that rebelled understand that they were deceived and have more empathy and know the world is different outside of their narrow viewpoint. One of the Bathskyeth wing leaders is about to knife some innocent Griffin rider, and then it escalates and she tries to kill Dane. Violet sticks up for Dane because she starts wielding, and she's like, if you're gonna wield, you're gonna deal with me. And then thunder, lightning everywhere. Violet gives a really good speech about how they can die fighting each other or die fighting the enemy. Later that day, the royals decide they're still in peace talks, but they have come to several conclusions. One, this guy named Halden, who's the heir to the throne, must go on the 7th dragon journey as a diplomat because they're gonna go to like foreign lands. They agreed to pardon all of the kids who rebelled from Bathskyeth. They agreed to not do any examinations on Indarna, and she is allowed to hunt in the king's forest, which is just something she threw in there. Then we find out the biggest news of them all, which is that Xaden got his title back, and he is officially the Duke of Aracia and Tyrandor. Now it's time for Plan B. Violet needs to make the alliance happen and thinks the royals won't come to it on their own. She is going to break into the Wardstone, alter it using Mira's new discovery, and hopefully keep the protection there, but remove the part that doesn't allow Griffins to use their magic within Bathskyeth. They go to knock out the guards in front of this room, and it's Mira. She's replaced the guards because she knew Violet would do this. There's a serious talk about risking the wards that Mama Sorengale just gave her life to power, because if they fail and they can't just alter them, they will fall and everyone will not be protected. And if they succeed, she will be tried for treason and probably executed. So naturally, they decide to do it anyway, and Brennan shows up because Mira told him, be there just in case, because he can mend the wards if things go south. Hopefully. This is the last place their mother was before she died. It's very emotional, but they do it, it works, and now they have to stand trial for treason. Violet takes the fall for this alone. She's in class when rumor spreads of what happened. Rumor that Violet specifically orchestrated to play out a certain way. Dane's dad runs in the room. Dane is like, Dad? And his dad is like, I have no son. It's very sad. I feel so bad for Dane. He grabs Violet, hauls her to the committee, and Xaden is on the committee, and he had no idea what she was doing. Very fun. She naturally wins her little trial because they were already pardoned anyway, and she was like, loophole, I did it before. Then Queen Mariah arrives. She is the ruler of Poramil. This is the kingdom next to Navarre, where the Griffin Flyers are from. She thanks Violet for removing the rune because it gave her people their power back. This was Plan B, and Violet did it in exchange for the alliance, but also getting access to Viscount Takaris's library. But the queen is like, you can also look in my library. So now she has both of these places to search, which likely hold the only secrets that could be found. After she gets away with this, Dane's dad is still very mad. He's also the new general, replaced Mama Sorengale, And as punishment, he sends the group to the front lines. Violet and friends go to the war zone, and Xaden goes somewhere else. And then almost immediately, a tiny village starts burning, and the people on the war zone are like, we can't go there because it's so small and we can't send our resources there. There's like more stuff going on. Even though there's like nothing else going on, they just don't want to send anyone. So Violet is like, we will go, just us. And they mainly want to go because Marin, one of Violet's friends' family, is in this village. Everything goes south very quickly when they realize it was a trap. And the Dark Wielder from Jack's cell is there, the Venin who attacked her before, the one that moves. She also has silver hair, Violet's hair, silver on the ends. She also has a tattoo on her forehead, and I didn't think anybody besides Dragon Riders in this universe had tattoos, the signet tattoos. It's a really scary fight, and Tern almost dies. He loses consciousness and is like falling off a mountain. The bond goes silent, and Darna cries. I did tear up. Violet comes to when Garrick, who's supposed to be like 8 hours away with Xaden, grabs her. And first, Violet is like, how the heck did you get here? Because it should be impossible for him to get there. So that's gonna be something. Garrick also says that Xaden went insane and he is not like himself right now, once he found out Violet was in trouble. So maybe Xaden like threw him through space and time. I don't know how being a Venin works. But then Lady Venin walks up, doesn't attack, but starts chatting to Violet. She introduces herself. Her name is Theorphany, says she knows everything about Violet and they are too interconnected. And then she asks her which dragon chose her first. Tern, the one who gave her power of the skies, or the Irid. We've never heard this word before. Today we're gonna get some serious scrapbooking in and some serious reading. As you may have guessed, an Irid is the species of dragon that Indarna is, an iridescent scorpion tail. Theophany, the Venin lady, leaves them alive and says some ominous things. She says that she wants Violet to choose her instead of Berwyn as her teacher, which I assume is another Dark Wielder. She also says she will give Violet control and knowledge, the two things she needs, and Violet has been saying through this whole series that she needs knowledge. Violet also describes her tone, Theophany's, as the same infuriating tone that Xaden has, which is kind of suspicious. I'm starting to think that the Venin, the male Venin she speaks to in her dreams, is Xaden from the future, and he's gonna go full Venin, and maybe he's going back in time to save the world from that happening. We learn the reason that Garrick is able to show up is because he has a second signet. He is a long distance wielder. They go back to Basgiath, and Xaden is mad and crazy, and Brennan heals Violet. He's definitely losing control and saying things like, I would drain the earth if it meant I could save you. And then there's a spicy scene on the table that everyone was sitting at. They're not there. They leave and then immediately they get busy, but not full busy because they don't want to have sex anymore because Xaden is afraid that he'll go full Venin. A bit passes and all classes resume. Then Xaden sends a letter that he was injured on the front line, but it is really to mask that he tapped into his Veninness on the front lines and drained some more. This prompts her to check on Jack, who looks like death, and she starts asking him questions in exchange for energy. She brings like an alloy down, which I was picturing like metal that he was eating. It's like a ball of energy, and if he answers the questions, he can have a snack, and that will prolong his life because he is slipping away. We learn that new Venin can detect one another, but sages and mavens cannot. Meaning, if this entire place was filled with the highest of high dark wielders, we would not know. And that makes Violet question who has been channeling there for years under the radar. Again, I think Mama Sorengale was one of those. Besides that, he's not a lot of help, says there's no cure, and he has generally evil vibes. Then she goes to the archives and finds out that Jacinia, the scribe that was helping them, is kicked out of the Adept program. Additionally, Sawyer is learning sign language for Jacinia, who is deaf and can't hear. And the two of them have like a really cute thing going on. They also discovered the second Crovelin uprising was supported by an Isle Kingdom, so it seems like an ally they have that they don't know much about and haven't had contact in a long time. Coming up short in the archives, Violet realizes that there are journals that belong to her father in the general's quarters that her parents used to live in, but now General Atos, Dane's dad, lives in, and she is trying to concoct a plan to get them out, but it will involve Dane having to betray his dad, because to get in there, you have to share the blood with the residing general. While she's thinking on that, Xaden starts teaching classes. He does this in exchange for getting off the front lines, which if he stays there, it is likely he will go full Venom. His class is called Signet Sparring, and I've had so much fun with this section of the book. It also presents a new challenge because as professor and student, Xaden and Violet can't date, which is kind of silly, but kind of fun. As soon as he gets promoted, General Atos shows up and he's like, I want you to know there will be no exceptions. You have to break up. And then Violet kind of does break up with him. She says, we live by the codex. But like 2 pages ago, he said he would drain the earth if they were no longer together. But it just feels kind of goofy and breaks the tension because stakes are so high, and then we're presented with this. They have done so much and they're such powerful individuals, but then they're like asking for permission again, even though they're in a full rebellion. They then meet for the 7th Dragon Quest, and the party that has been selected is so doomed to fail. Everyone who is joining them is comically terrible and has general villainous energy. They are also spying like children on Xaden and Violet to make sure they don't do anything romantic, which is the top orders of the general commander in a time when this terrible war is breaking out and people are dying, and the leaders of Navarre are dedicating all of their resources to make sure that these 2 young adults don't get freaky. And ironically, they're not even getting freaky because Xaden is afraid he's gonna turn into some life-sucking monster. It is the worst meeting ever. Everyone's like screaming and talking over each other. But then Xaden like starts rubbing Violet's thighs with his shadows during the meeting. So honestly, one member of the squad, or a Binehaven, which is the lovely individual that was going to kill someone earlier and threaten Dane's life, she stays behind to escort Violet. They try to be alone, Violet and Xaden, after the meeting, and she's like, I'll walk you. Out of everyone in the group, she has the most henchman energy of them all. At the end, they decide that they're likely going north on the meeting, but Violet wants to go south. Violet asks Dane if he's willing to betray his father and break into his dad's office, and he seems down with it, so they have started preparing. But now, ring ring, class is in session. Xaden is the teacher, and they are in the pit, which is like a deep crevice he created for magic to stay within it and not affect anything outside, so they can really get crazy in there. A student says Xaden isn't experienced enough to teach, and Xaden makes him cry. Both Riddick and Kat say it was hot in front of Violet, and that did make me giggle. Then Xaden brings everyone else up to the mat and beats them all up. It is cool. You see a bunch of different signets and how he can counteract each one of them. I do really love the magic system within this series. Then he gets all ominous and foreboding and says that there's only one person capable of killing him and looks at Violet. Violet then gets up and fights him. Kat says Violet slays, which we love. Their relationship is becoming super fun. While Xaden and Violet are fighting, it does get spicy. Honestly, lock them up. He surrounds them with shadows so no one can see anything, but it's weird, and he says that he's training her to kill him. After class, Dane breaks into his father's office and gets the journal. Violet is super nervous about this because her fate lies with him and he could turn her in. But he does the stealing alone, and he pulls through and gets her dad's journal. But of course, it's not that simple, and it needs a riddle to open. Then we're back in Xaden's class. The second one, he goes completely insane. Prince Halden comes in, and immediately they have to hide Auric, who is his brother. Halden is the prince heir to the throne, and Auric is the spare. And he's been hiding in this Dragon War College for like a year now, and his family doesn't know where he is, which I think is insane. Halden and Violet start talking, and Halden's like, I wonder where my brother is, and he's like under the seat. But then Halden and Violet get like flirty vibes, and you can tell that there's something more between them, or was. Halden then gives her a letter that says if they fetch a crystal from someplace, he can make sure they go south like she wants instead of north. Then Halden asks Violet on a date, but she says no, he had his chance, but she walked in on his professor, quote, riding him. Then, unsurprisingly, shadows throw him into a brick wall. I wonder where those came from. Xaden, rushes to his side and cockily, not the right book for that. Xaden then arrogantly rushes to his side and says that he was blocking a life-threatening blow from a first year and needed to get him out of the way. I love this diva. Also, Xaden answers every question that Auric asked Violet during their conversation. For example, he said, do you think about me? And in this moment, Xaden says, no, she doesn't think about you. We are in love. But he was across the room, so he was reading their minds. He's not supposed to do that. Violet is pissed. She's really angry that he threw the heir of the throne into a wall. Later that night, Violet is in her room and she cracks the code to her dad's journal. The book opens and there is a letter in there with very specific instructions. It tells her to ride for Corden, and it says that he knows that Mom and Brennan are dead. Brennan is not really dead, but he thought Brennan was dead. But he should have no idea his wife is dead. That is where you can find it, Corden, and there they speak Crovish, which is a language that Dane fluently speaks because Violet's dad organized it for him to do so. Asher was playing chess, not checkers, babes. And specifically, she is supposed to seek out a merchant called Norel Amsum. She is in Deverelli, and Violet is to bring her most valuable item to trade. Lastly, it says to trust only Mira, and she is safe beyond the magic in Deverelli. How does he know all this? Later that night, it is sad boy hours, and Xaden shows up at her door. He is described to have his head bowed and in his hands like this when he knocks, and he just says, "Did you love him?" over and over and over again. When she says she did love him, as an 18-year-old girl had the capacity to, they were young and dumb and she didn't really understand, he flies into the desk and then he is like white-knuckling the furniture. Then he flips and is a spicy scene. Apparently it was not a big deal. I don't know what he is thinking. But remember, they're not supposed to do this. They're only supposed to limit to kissing. I don't make the rules, but every time they do it, he says that he's going to commit crimes. Now it is spooky, sneaky reconnaissance mission time to get the crystal that they will use to barter, to get safe passage into the south, the Isle Kingdoms, I think. The crystal is located in Anka, which is flyer territory, where the griffins live. There are venom everywhere and they can't wield there or it will alert them. And public enemy number 1, Aura Bindhaven, thinks Professor Grady is a venom and lights him on fire. She also lit like half the town on fire, and within seconds, buildings are just up in flames. Needless to say, they no longer are hidden. Aura starts screaming, "What have I done? What have I done?" when a wyvern, the pets of the venom, comes down, snatches her right up. I know I'm not supposed to be on Team Venom, but I resonate with this. We get a very cool fight scene. Sigale climbs up the back of one of the wyvern and rips its wings off. And of course, as they're leaving, everyone's like, "Oh, we didn't get the crystal." When Mira is like, "This crystal." She saved the day. However, there was a letter next to the crystal that said, "To Violet, from Theophany." The letter did make me laugh because it is very casual. Theophany is like, "Hey girl, come to me, ask me your questions. I know you're looking for a weapon, I have all the answers. But stay on your toes, because I could have stolen you here. I could have. I don't want to do that, but I will. I am starting to suspect that we are going to Venom territory because Violet is getting kidnapped." I would love that. I think that would be really fun. Not for Violet, but for me. They head back to the Cenarium to update the leaders and also to get a new professor to lead the next quest because the old one is cooked. They hand Violet a paper with new orders, which basically say that there is a meeting set for the King of Deverelli, who they're giving the crystal to in order to meet with him, and also that they are going to search Aracia for the 7th dragon breed, which makes absolutely no sense. So as she should, Violet rips up the paper and goes kind of insane. Tells them they created a squad that was doomed to fail and people died because of them. Markham tries to interrupt and she says, and I quote, "You do not speak. You have the credibility of a drunkard and the integrity of a rat. And her squad are leaving tomorrow." First stop is Athbeam and then Corden. There they meet with Takaris, which if you don't remember is the lovely individual from the last book who gave her a venom in a box. They're going to rest at his house before they leave for Deverelli. They have flown for like 24 hours straight when they arrive, and Violet is so sore she almost loses consciousness walking into the estate. She describes being in so much pain, but then when Xaden gets her alone, he slams her into a door. And suddenly the pain is gone. I don't know how it works. Surprise, they're kissing again, but they don't go any farther because, again, he will kill everyone. In the morning, they leave the continent and lose magic as they fly over the ocean. The plan is for Halden to meet with the king, give him the crystal in exchange for that, and Violet Xaden and friends are going to peel off and meet the merchant her dad sent her to find. This is a different continent, and Navarians, people from her continent, have not been here in over a century. So this is a very big historic event. There's no magic here. That is why the dragons live in Navarre. Everyone also loses their bond with their dragon and cannot communicate to them telepathically. Violet and Xaden cannot speak, but Violet, Taryn, and Andarna can, and they don't know why. Deverelli is very beautiful. It's very tropical, super different from where they're used to. But the first thing they notice is giant dragon-killing crossbows pointed at the sky when they fly in. They land at Takaris's house. He had a house in Corden, which was like the last stop on the last continent before they flew over, and now he has a house here. So they flew like house to house. He is a political leader here, so it's very formal, very regal. Andarna is super excited to be here. There's a beautiful tropical ocean, and her and Taryn have some really funny conversations. He tells her to like straighten up her posture and to take her tail off of the ground. What do you think this is? The veil? Immediately, Xaden is super at peace here because there is no magic for him to eat and become more venom. Takaris borrows everyone a horse to ride into town, and this is one of my favorite scenes of the book. Our moody, brooding Xaden is in such a good mood that it is hilarious and surprising to everyone there, which like, I don't love when I think about it. Violet really romanticizes how she's the only one that gets to see the kind side of him, but I think that's weird. For the first time in like 3 books, we see him have a normal conversation. He asks Dane and Violet about riding horses together when they were kids, which is like a super normal thing. But it's so surprising, and he's treating Dane with respect, and I get Dane has done things, but this highlights why I don't really like Xaden. I just find him to be toxic. It's why I didn't love Iron Flame. The ask me questions, you have to ask me the right questions, ask me the truth, like that he was doing for the whole last book, drove me so cuckoo bananas, I would have had Taryn light that man on fire. Riddick is also hilarious in this scene. I feel like I'm really starting to get attached to characters and understand their personalities. I've found that there's a lot of people who don't really matter in this series, that it is hard to get attached to individuals, and the world is really, really big. It didn't feel like we had a concrete ensemble to root and feel for until now. Like when Liam died, I wasn't attached enough to him at that point, and maybe that was my fault as a reader, that it wasn't super impactful. But now you'll have to pry Riddick out of my cold dead hands. In trying to find this merchant that Violet's dad sent her for, Xaden grabs Dane and says, "Come on, Crovelish, let's go." And the two of them go out and find who this is. And Xaden is funny and nice, and the group wonders if this is who he could be if his dad wasn't in a rebellion, wasn't killed, if he didn't have the responsibility of the marked ones, and Violet thinking in her head, if he wasn't turning into a venom actively. And she considers a deal that Takaris offered her, which is basically to be his personal bodyguard, and she can live on one of his private islands with Xaden, an island where he wouldn't continue being a venom. And she thinks about shutting the whole world out and doing that, which is essentially what Navarre did and why there was a rebellion in the first place. So she feels really conflicted having those thoughts, but also he is her world. And I can't help but think about how she hates her mom for doing the same thing to protect her child, her daughter. I love Mama Sorengale, and I don't think that we're done hearing about the sacrifices she made. Xaden and Dane come back after figuring out where her shop is. This merchant is called Narelle. She is a seller of rare books and owns a shop called Tomes and Tales. When the squad gets in there, they're immediately attacked by who we find out are Narelle's grandchildren who think they are keeping the book safe from people that aren't Violet. But when Narelle lays eyes on Violet's gray hair, she calls off the fight and says, you must be Asher Sorengale's daughter. I fear my favorite character just dropped. I love this woman. She's 93. She hits on Xaden and she says, what? I'm old, not dead. Or as you Navarians say, Met Malik. Narelle has 6 books to give to Violet and tells her that her father risked everything, all of their lives, with the sole purpose that Violet would get them in the future. He left the books with Narelle 1 year before he died, and in order for Violet to get them, she has to answer 3 questions her dad has. The questions relate to the book Dane stole that he knew she would attain, including a hypothesis about how Navarre promised this continent dragons, but that fell through, and that is why the relationship between the two soured. It is a mystery. Violet's still working it through in her head, but it's hinted at that they were dealing in dragons, smuggling baby dragons to this southern continent that doesn't have them, and also something about hunting feathertails. The last question is, why did you leave the prince? Which is when we get the full story about Violet and the prince, who did in fact have a relationship. And she left him even though she could have been on the throne, because no amount of power is worth staying with someone who doesn't love you. And her dad wanted to make sure that she knew her value before having this information. All of this happens in front of the squad, including Mira, who she obviously picked to come with, and she is mad, rightfully so. Your dad made your sister the chosen one, and you're just supposed to sit there like, great, okay. But then Narelle sees that and tells Mira, this is Violet's part to play, you have yours. While your dad was raising Violet for this, your mom was raising you for something else. Between chapters, when they do their recovered correspondence, a lot of them are between Asher and Lilith Sorengale, their parents. They're very sneaky and allude to their children becoming weapons. Is that good parenting? I don't know. Hey Reddit, do I turn my child into a weapon? Does that make me a bad parent? What are the implications of this? With the information, they head home, and Xaden and Violet do it for the first time in 6 weeks. Which, if you don't know, is the longest time in romantasy that could possibly happen. They're doing it because there's no magic for him to go to the dark side with, but because there's no magic, they cannot create a sound shield. And I am deeply fearful for everyone in the house. They bring a desk that doesn't belong to them in this political leader's house. Now, I've never been on a diplomatic meeting, but my intuition tells me that this is bad behavior. Having loud, vigorous intercourse, that you break furniture that does not belong to you, is probably bad for international relations. I can't help but think, no wonder you have not been allowed here in over 100 years. This romantic, criminally diabolical evening is interrupted, probably because they heard what was going on. But also, Prince Halden has been kidnapped. They fly there immediately because Xaden is the only aristocrat amongst them and the best hope at getting Halden back. They land their dragons in the front lawn of the palace, and the place is immediately on guard, but they convince them to let them inside, where they find the king pointing a dagger at Halden. This is the first we've met King Courtland, and he is young and attractive and almost immediately stabs Halden in the hand. The reason Halden has been kidnapped is because he offered a gift that wasn't his to give, and the king took great offense to it. The gift being the blade of Aracia, the dagger he's holding. It was actually a power move against Xaden because the blade belongs to his house. But additionally to that, Halden instructed his personal guard to go down into the king's personal collection and steal artifacts that Halden believed belonged to Navarre. This scene is unfolding at a formal dinner table, and in front of them are those fancy silver platters that you unveil. And they unveil them, and things start to go very sideways. First, there is almost an entire full cow raw on the table. The king has 3 white panthers. This is their dinner, and they begin to stalk towards the group. But then the last platter is revealed, and it is the beheaded head of Halden's personal guard. Beheaded head. Our couple tries to de-escalate the situation, tells the king that Halden no longer speaks for Navarre, and they want to organize trade amongst themselves. But the king just says he's good and that Takaris can live, but to kill the rest. And then breaks out my favorite fight scene of the book so far, because Xaden and Violet are trying to keep Halden alive, even though in this moment they want to kill him themselves, but they also don't want to kill any of the southern continent's guards, because they don't want to lose the deal of being able to search here. But King Courtland's men desperately want to kill our couple, so that will hopefully kill the dragons outside who are being alerted to this situation. But then Violet's life gets in a bit too much danger for Xaden, and say it with me, he goes insane. And then he drains the magic from the blade of Aracia, which is a magic item, and he snaps everyone's neck. Immediately his eyes turn a deep red color, and there are no survivors except for Halden, the king, and Violet. Naturally, Violet panics and tries to disguise what just happened. The king is super confused because there is no magic here, and he says that. But Violet instructs him to put his head down like he is ashamed. She tells the king that the Duke feels remorse, but he is taught to fight back, and they did try to kill him. The plan is for him to go home to Aracia, hide out so no one knows what just happened. That is when Andarna walks in through the door and snatches up one of the panthers in her jaw. She puts on quite a show. The king is freaking out. This forces the king to negotiate the same terms, allowing them to search the Isles. Violet gives him the crystal as promised, but additionally gives him Andarna's dragon egg and explains that this is the 7th dragon type they will be looking for in his Isles. In exchange for the Southern King not telling Navarre what transpired here today. And finally, Halden is never allowed back on this continent, or his life will be forfeit. Andarna agreed to give away her dragon egg, which seems odd to me. It also feels like far too high of price. So there's gotta be more to why it was given away so easily. They say the deal is struck. The king does allude to another bargain he would like to make in the future, and Xaden leaves on Sagail before anyone else can see what he has become. While they were gone, Venin continued to push the line. They are a military, same as Basgiath. This is war and very organized. Somehow they know the wards are going to fall in 6 months, and they want to get to the hatching grounds, which are in Basgiath. They go back to class while they're waiting to debrief with the royals. In that time, Violet asks Bodhi if he has a second signet, and he says, "No, I don't," just like Xaden, but we know that's not true. So that feels kind of suspicious to me, like he might be hiding something, and again adds to could be a betrayer. 8 days later, Xaden shows up and his eyes no longer are gold flecked, they are amber flecked. A change is definitely happening within him and is now becoming visible. Alarmingly, while they are in class, a girl drains, meaning she was Venom, and Violet wonders how Xaden didn't sense her because newbies are supposed to be able to pick up on each other. And then it is not addressed, but they do immediately kill her. Bodhi creates a serum to give to Violet to use on Xaden in case things go south. It's not really explained if this kills him or just nullifies the power for a second. And then it is time to meet with the royals. They want the group to go island, report back, which is like 24 hours back and forth and an absurd ask. So shockingly, our group decides to disobey and they are going to leave in the morning for an island and not come back until they find the 7th dragon breed. But they agreed to the royals' plan, so they think that they're going to report back between each. Everyone on the squad knows what's really happening except for Halden. He thinks they're only going to Umbriel and he's getting kidnapped again, which is hilarious. But just as they are about to leave, Auric, his brother, the hidden spare to the throne, shows up and tells Halden that he will be going in his place as the diplomat. Mind you, he's been missing for over a year. He says he walked the parapet because his brother and dad weren't going to do anything to protect the continent, so he was going to do it and wasn't going to let his brother damn the continent now by messing something else up. They leave Halden behind and take off. On the flight there, which is the longest flight anyone has ever done, Violet reads her dad's journals, which I think is hilarious to think about, just like reading a book on Dragonback in the sky. But it does sound like my ideal afternoon. And he knows quite a bit about the Isles, which is suspicious because people haven't officially been there in a century. So how does he know all these things? Because he didn't have a dragon and it would take a really, really long time to go on boat. And I think some of these trips were during her lifetime, so wouldn't she realize her dad was missing for long periods of time? Unless he wasn't. More suspicious. They make camp on Umbriel and stage it so Umbriel's guards discover them and think they got the jump on them. But before that, we find out that Mira recently visited Grandma Niara, who is their father's mother, who they are estranged to. Apparently, their dad never spoke about his family, and they became distanced when he married their mother. But Mira alludes that it was the other way around, and won't tell Violet, but tells her that she needs to pay a visit to their grandmother. Which just like absolutely wouldn't fly with me, because if somebody I knew was like holding out on me information like that, that seems so pertinent. I would not let them sleep until I got it out of them. And I'm gonna be so mad if all along, all Violet and Mira needed to do was have the conversation right here and things would have been saved. Additionally, Mira has a strange black bracelet that I'm sure will never come up again that she got from her grandmother. So guards come, Violet's group is like, "Oh no, you're not supposed to be here." Because they know the rules, that if they best one of their best fighters, they will get an audience with their leader. Because this island worships Dune, the god of war, and they sacrifice blood. All of these islands worship one of the gods, and I'm starting to get the feeling that the gods are actually real and might have demigods, very Percy Jackson vibes. And I don't know how I feel about that. Our group is taken to the palace to fight and prove themselves. And inside, there are people with blue robes and silver hair. One girl has Violet's specific hair, brown on top with silver ends. But first, we must fight. Down the steps comes 3 absolute units of warriors. Precious Auric does volunteer to fight all 3 of them, and that level of delusion is actually concerning. The priestess that is overseeing this whole thing has a Dune tattoo on her forehead. Where else have we seen a forehead tat? Theophany. Suspicious. Ultimately, it is decided that Xaden will fight, and at first, we think it'll just be one-on-one. But then the priestess throws Dane into the mix, and now it's 2-on-2, and turns to Violet and says, "Do you like your life?" Yes. And then the priestess responds with, "Then it is good we did not finish your dedication. Do you not yearn for this temple?" Usually, the touch creates such a longing you cannot help but return. Perhaps you now favor another god, but it's not too late for Dune to teach you. And then she throws Violet into the ring. Out of the 3-on-3, it is only Violet who wins her fight, and she saves Xaden in the process. And it's because normally he is able to read other people's thoughts, and that's why he's such a good fighter. But Violet has never been able to do that and has worked so hard to get to this point, and it made me very emotional. I was very proud of her. Dane does also lose consciousness completely, but he tried. And the woman that Violet bested turned out to be the queen herself, who only speaks to those who best her. She agrees to let the group search the island for the 7th dragon breed, but doesn't ally and agree to send warriors to fight the venom. For that, she wants dragon eggs. She thinks back to her dad's journal, the mention of trading in dragons. She puts together the Southern Isle asked for dragon eggs, but they gave them feather tails, mistaking them for being malleable. The queen makes comments about how Navarre has let the dragons become too headstrong, and poses questions about if the dragons even care about their riders, saying that she believes dragons only care about their kind. During this fight, the reason Violet is able to win is because lightning crashes down within the palace. Violet chalks this up to luck, because there shouldn't be a way that she could do that here with no magic. She wonders if Andarna did it, or potentially Andarna's kind can create magic. After the fight, they return to camp. They talk a bit about the hair and the people that resemble Violet. She asks Mira if her hair grew in like that or changed at a certain age. It grew in like that. And she totally brushes off being dedicated to Dune, stating that that practice was outlawed centuries ago. And I don't know about you, but for someone desperately seeking answers, Violet willfully ignores clues, or purposely forgets them. With that, they're on to the next isle, where they get a warmer welcome, but an unexpected and unwanted surprise. This place is dedicated to knowledge and peace, and when they get there, everyone is wearing colorful clothing, though the buildings are all very bland. They all also have stunning violet eyes and walk up to them on a beach. Amongst them is Xaden's mom. This is very shocking and kind of a random feeling, but I think it works because that's how the characters are supposed to feel. Her name is Talia, and immediately she's super sweet but very shocked to see Xaden, and he seems frightened and refuses to meet her. But she is married to one of the triumvirate, which are like a group of 4 people that make up the government. And lucky for him, the group is staying with her husband, whose name is Ferris and is one of these leaders. The group settles into their room in the estate, and Talia immediately brings them sweets and asks them if they will go to dinner tonight, where she will set up a meeting with the full triumvirate. Violet says thank you for the treats, but also threatens to burn the house down if she does anything to hurt Xaden. In the room, Xaden opens up about his mom. It's really sad, and he feels very abandoned. We find out the reason he likes chocolate cake is because she made him that on his birthday, but that's also the day that she left. Alarmingly, he does share that part of him does want to be Venin, so he doesn't have to feel this way. And if it couldn't get any worse, they look outside and there's two little boys looking at the dragons, and then Talia goes up to them and they call her mom. She did in fact start a whole new family. But for the mission, he puts that aside and goes down to dinner. But just before they do, Violet starts getting a little paranoid and doing the mental gymnastics that she does. She, who is famed for poisoning people, is bringing tea to dinner. Though this meeting is clearly a test, I would have my popcorn out because almost immediately Xaden calls his mother out and they start airing out all the dirty laundry. We learn that she was from here, but in a political alliance, signed a contract to go up, have Xaden, and remain for 3 years. And she claims she wanted to take him, but that was not allowed because he is the heir of Tyrandor. We catch on very quickly that that kind of thing is what this place is known for. They are so analytical, they leave emotion out of it, and they're very cold and pretentious. They are interested in forming an alliance with our group and letting them search the Isles in exchange for marriage. They propose marrying someone from their group, but also get into their business and ask questions like why Kat doesn't marry Xaden, because that is the best alliance they could form within the young nobles there. And think it's dumb they haven't done that and shows they don't have a lot of wisdom. But Kat has a total girl's girl moment and says that Violet and Xaden are way better together because they could rebuild the world. And Xaden says if they want a wedding so bad, they can have one tomorrow and his last name will be Sorengale. It's sweet. Soon dinner comes out and it is chocolate cake. But Violet realizes that that is something they would have had to plan for. It doesn't grow here and would take weeks to import, which means everything up until this point, when she acted surprised at the beach, was an act. And something is in the cake. Unfortunately, Garrick already ate the majority of his. He stops breathing and falls to the ground. Talia starts screaming at her husband, says that she didn't know. The conversation, the poisoning, all of this has been the triumvirate's test, which they have failed. But Violet turns the tables when she tells them that they have been poisoned, and if they give their antidote, she will give them hers. But their pride would make them rather die than lose because they don't want anyone to know they were outsmarted. With limited time and her dad's journal, she works out what they use to poison Garrick, the cake. In hopes of figuring out what the poison is, she goes to the cook. She stabs him, but not before he throws his knife and it is sticking out of Riddick's side. I was really scared for about 15 seconds before we discover that it went through his flight jacket and he's pissed because he doesn't like to sew. He pulls the knife out, beats up the man. They get the antidote, give it to Garrick, and he wakes up. Then Xaden goes crazy on Farish. Violet convinces him not to kill him and says they need the alliance. But they don't even have an army, so I probably would have done it. But he doesn't, and they're able to search the island, which they still could have done because they have dragons. again. Ultimately, Ferris's pride lets them go because now that they're alive and leaving, he can't let anyone know he was outsmarted. He won't get reelected. Additionally, Andarna is outside of his children's room, poised to eat them. She's not actually going to do that, but they don't know that. Ferris says that he should have known she was Asher Sorengil's daughter. And this terrible family reunion is ended by them searching the island for the 7th dragon breed, which they don't find, and heading off to Zelna, the second to last island they will search. They're flying there now, again very tropical, except for now there's a lot of waterfalls and rivers. In the center of town, there's an amphitheater with hundreds of seats that are beginning to fill. They were definitely expecting them. Andarna is really excited, but I have a terrible feeling about this. No one has any weapons and they don't seem fearful, but this is the oddest greeting they have had so far. As they land in the amphitheater, the folks just cheer. I don't know if I would land there. Do you feel that? Feel what? Magic! Oh my god, there's magic here. That's surprising. I didn't think anywhere in the southern continent had magic. But if it would be anywhere, it would be here, the island of the goddess of luck. It's not enough magic to wield, but it's enough that everyone has their connection back to their dragon. With Sigale and Xaden's bond back, she is immediately yelling at him. And with Xaden and Violet's connection back, immediately he wants to talk about her getting in his way and reveals that he was scared he was going to hurt Violet when he was all worked up on the last island. And now they're having an argument on whether or not he is too dangerous. Violet saying she can sense if he's dangerous, and he's saying that she can't. Xaden just has a lot of feelings. He both wants Violet to stop him from doing terrible things, but doesn't want her to get close because he can't imagine hurting her. What is it? Part of me thinks Xaden is going to hide away from Violet at the end of this book, or before. This conversation is interrupted as one of the individuals from this island walks towards them with a cone-shaped item about half Violet's height. And now the crowd is falling quiet. She introduces herself as Calixtra, mistress of today's activities. Now she is speaking to the crowd in a language they don't understand. That's always a good sign. They must play a game and accept whatever gifts the god of luck bestows upon them. She leads them to a table in the center of this amphitheater with thousands of people watching and pulls out a deck of cards. Says that each card represents a gift and starts shuffling at random. She spreads the cards on the table and asks the group to each pick one. Then Violet thinks, there's no way this many people have gathered to watch me open presents. Mira is going first. She picks a card and she is gifted wine. Marin receives 2 orange tunics. Dane's card is a slap to the face. She slaps him and he has to thank her. Garrick is given a rusted steel bucket. Auric gets a fractured hand mirror that immediately cuts him. Xaden is given an empty glass box, and Violet gets a compass, a broken compass. Okay. Riddick got kissed. His card had lips on it, and some man smooched him. Kat is given a gold necklace with a dangling ruby the size of her thumb, so she really lucked out there. Drake is given a kitten, and Xaden immediately thinks, what the fuck are we going to do with that thing for the rest of the trip? And then it cuts to the dragons who have an idea. This is so fun and random, but I have a sinking feeling that there is more to this. And finally, Traeger, who I haven't mentioned much about, but this was a great way to get the whole squad's name. He has begun to start a relationship with Kat, But unfortunately, he just drew the arrow card, and he got an arrow to the chest and immediately died. The group rushes to him, but it's too late. And now they need to make sure to not react or they will be punished, because that's the rule. You have to be grateful for whatever you're given. Kat is starting to scream and they have to hold her back. Traeger's griffin was called Sillistrain, and now she's dying. Violet does what she has to do to explore this island and get the alliance. She thanks the archer for killing him, and they're allowed to leave. After that, they agree to terms. They will give them 40,000 soldiers for the war against the Darkwielders, which is great, but they don't find the Irids on the island and have to come to terms with what it would mean to return without them. Poor Andarna will be crushed. When they get back, they'll be thrown in prison for dereliction of duty. But worst of all, without the cure and a way to beat them, this means losing the war to the Darkwielders. The last island is Loisum, and it's kind of their last chance. Before heading there, they want to search minor islands and also burn the bodies of the griffin and rider who just fell. They find a minor island for the funeral, but quickly realize that they're off course. What they see from the sky does not match their maps, and interestingly enough, there is more magic here than the previous island. There are a lot more islands than what was recorded on their maps. They're gonna split off and search the minor islands for one day before heading to the next big island. With more magic here, it tempts Xaden more to drain, so Violet has decided to go with Riddick and him with Garrick, so they're not together because she is a trigger for him. The whole "I would drain the earth to save you" thing. Riddick and his dragon, Atrum, have a really fun relationship. His dragon is splashing him with ocean water and he's getting mad. And apparently this is his dragon getting him back because Riddick put itching powder between his scales. I do love how everyone has a different relationship with their dragons and they have so much personality. It sounds like Riddick's is a lot like him. Violet hears the ground shudder, goes to turn around, and says, "I swear to God, Tairn, but I have a suspicion that it's not Tairn." The ground shudders again and again, and my eyes fly open, and there are fresh dragon tracks, but neither Tairn or Atrum are there. Are we finding more of Andarna's kind? The sand is moving and she can't see anything. They're invisible. The air in front of her solidifies into sky blue scales. 6 dragons of varying colors fill the beach, and all of them rival the size of Sigale. We did not find the Irids. The Irids found us. And then in her head, she hears, "Hello, human." This greeting shocks Violet to her core because dragons don't speak to riders they're not bonded to. She finds herself so surprised she can't form words, and they start having a conversation. One of the Irids suggests Violet is not intelligent enough to speak with them, so Andarna stands up for her. She is very excited to meet them, and it is a heartfelt moment. She says they are all her family, both the Irids and Violet. Then Andarna begins to tell her story, beginning with threshing. These dragons don't live amongst humans, so everything is very surprising. The Irids share that there are hundreds more of them, and they're very polite, though they are really surprised by the closeness of Andarna and Violet's bond. But then the Irids start to pry. They can't believe she used her juvenile gift, time slowing, to save Violet. At first, they gasp at the things that she says, but begin to grow quiet. And it is evident they are growing angry at the life she has had. How Violet channeled from her, bonded her as a juvenile, and took her to war. At the end, Andarna asks if she passed their test, and they say, "Yes, but your human did not." Things go south very quickly. Taryn and Andarna stick up for Violet. The Irids tell Andarna she was used and taken advantage of as a vulnerable child. Andarna asks if they think she's broken, and they say, "We think you're a weapon." She says, "Thank you," and they say it wasn't a compliment. Our breed was born of peace. Then they reveal Andarna was left behind as the Criterion. She was supposed to serve as a measure of human growth. They tell her she was supposed to return and prove that humans have changed, when in fact, she has proven the opposite. They say Dragonkind has not learned their lessons either. They say Atrum has equipped his rider with ice. Taryn has equipped his with lightning, and you, Andarna, have equipped yours with something far worse. Violet's second signet. In the most heartbreaking line, they tell her she has weaponized everything about herself and become the very thing they abhor, the horror they fled from. Of course, this is a he did not moment, and Taryn and Violet are ready to fight. Violet begs them. The peace that they preach won't be attainable unless they help power the Wardstone, which they refuse to do. They say they don't care if people die, and perhaps they should. Perhaps the corrupted ones should consume the land in its entirety, and only when they're starving will they confront the evil they have become. They say there is no cure, but perhaps their offspring could evolve. And that makes me think again, Mama Sorengale. They share there is no soul to trade back because it's not traded. A piece of it dies every time they wield, and there is no cure for death. They also share that they did not defeat the Dark Wielders 600 years ago, if they are here asking. Andarna brings up the fact that she can burn venom and wants to know if that's the secret. And they say, no, you don't get it. You're magic, and the only thing you want to use it for is violence. The only thing they can agree on is they are all disappointments to one another. One Irid is interested in listening still. His name is Leothan. But then Xaden and Sigale return, and they can immediately detect that he is Venin. And one of the Irids says to Sigale, all of your kind is beyond saving. And then they leave. This secret is outed in front of Riddick, who turns to the couple and says, well, that's why you're looking for a cure so bad. Then Xaden and Andarna stomp off and shut out Violet. And Riddick says he will give her one moment to explain what the hell is going on. Violet tells Riddick everything, and they have a very important conversation. I feel myself resonating a lot with the tough love he is giving her. Ultimately, he doesn't want his friend, Violet, to get hurt, and feels as if she is not thinking about herself, but only him. They do fight, but Riddick is really calm and hears her out. And I must say, I find her justifications alarming. Over and over, she says, he would never hurt me. But it's clear that her own love is blinding her from the seriousness of this situation. As far as we know, no one in all of history has ever came back from this. They always channel, and there is no cure. He asks who else knows, and pretty much all of Xaden's specific friends do. All of which are likely more loyal to Xaden than they are to Violet. And Garrick, who puts Violet's safety above Xaden, realizes that he is probably the only one, including Violet, that does. At no fault of his own, Riddick worries Xaden could be playing everyone. Alarmingly, regardless of how illogical this is, they need to keep Xaden on their side. Because if they don't, and he goes on Team Venin, the war is already over. There is no rider alive powerful enough to stop him at what he could become. And even if it was her, what Xaden is training her to do, she could not do it. So Riddick asks for a real logical line that if Xaden crosses, he will sound the alarms. And they decide if Xaden hurts another rider, a civilian, or Violet, that will be it. He also requests that Sawyer, Rhiannon, and Jacinia be informed because they are on Violet's side, and also because they can kill Violet, because they're always with her, if things go south, because the easiest way to kill Xaden is to kill Violet. After a really difficult conversation, he agrees to keep his secret, and they return to the group. He realizes he has the ability to harm a lot of people, while Violet has trouble thinking outside of herself and Xaden. For example, the Irids were still hearing them out until they realized Xaden was a Venin amongst them, and he can see that it's not fair for him to doom the rest of the continent for him, but Violet cannot see that. And I really fear for what she would do because of that. To that, she says the dragon should have heard him out, should have listened to him. Okay, well, they're dragons and they didn't. I find myself going, okay, and to a lot of her thoughts during this part of the book. Almost a month later from when they originally left, they return to Basgiath empty-handed. There's a heartfelt reunion between the quest squad and those who stayed back in Navarre. Violet fills in her friends about being rejected by the Irids, and they mourn the loss of Traeger. Then General Atos arrives and delivers some terrible news. While they were gone, Seneva fell and Queen Mariah is dead. He is happy to blame them for these events and even congratulates Kat for being one step closer to the throne because she is related to the queen who passed. An absolutely rancid man. Before he leaves, he gives Violet a missive. He doesn't know who it's from, but we know it's from Theophany. It says, "Dear Violet, girl, why did you do all that when I already have all of the answers? You could have just asked me instead of running around like an idiot for a month. Also, you looked terrible. Get yourself cleaned up because we are getting together soon. Don't worry, I will make the reservation. XO, Gossip Girl." Theophany. This is followed by a very long debrief from both sides. Violet and the crew fill in Navarre. Navarre tells them what has happened for them in that time. The Dark Wielders are really speeding up. They have never done something as efficient as Seneva. 12 of them were able to take down 25,000 people. So they want to figure out how that happened so it doesn't happen again. And the conclusion that we come to is they entered during a storm that was controlled by Theophany. Theophany led the attack on the city because she's able to wield the same as Violet, and that hid the Venin and Wyvern as they entered. As promised to Riddick, Violet tells her friends about Xaden's secret. They react very similar to how he did. Andarna falls into a deep sadness following what happened with the Irids, and Xaden returns to teaching. They come up with a new way to get on their dragons because they really can't be on the ground with the Venin, and Bodhi kills it. Violet says, maybe I fell for the wrong cousin in front of Xaden. And he responds with, it would be a shame if I had to kill my only living family member. Xaden's birthday passes. Violet gets him a bracelet. 3 weeks passes of this. The wards continue to weaken and Wyvern slip through. And now it is time to go to Aratia. Navarre as a whole has not opened its borders to people fleeing the Wyverns, but Xaden has opened Tyrandor's, a province within Navarre's borders. Halden and Xaden get into a fight over this, and Halden threatens to bring Navarre's armies to Tyrandor and make them shut their borders. and Xaden tells him that Auric will find himself heir to the throne. Another shadow wielder manifests at Basgiath. It's a first-year student, which is huge because there's only been one on the planet at all times. Magic seems to work in harmony and not give too much of itself away. So this really signifies that the magic knows what is happening to Xaden, and this is it correcting itself to balance out. This makes Violet spiral, but has Xaden say that the man she loves no longer entirely belongs to himself. I believe this sentence is realistic, but Violet says that this is him giving up, and I'm starting to get real scared of Violet. At one point, she mentions turning Venin so they can stay together and keep the bond because she doesn't know what will happen to it as he goes further into this change. On a positive note, Sawyer flies for the first time. He made a prosthetic for himself, and the two of them, Violet and Sawyer, have conversations with their dragons about disabilities and making modifications for them as riders. Though Violet does ask if Tarn ever had to make a modification for Naolin, and he closes up so fast and says we do not talk about the one before. Now if you don't know, that is Tarn's last rider, and he is gone. The books have made us feel like he is dead, but it's never explicitly said that. So I believe he is Venin. I also think that Brennan and Naolin were romantically involved. It is part of the reason I think Brennan may betray us for Naolin, for love. I think that might be the curse of the Swordgale siblings. Lilith would be so mad. While in Erasia, Brennan goes to Violet and says, I can't heal him. But he is not supposed to know about Xaden's situation. But Xaden came to him privately, told him, and they have been trying to heal him. They tried putting magic back into the earth, made offerings to all of the gods, and even meditated at the hatching grounds, which I think is a hilarious visual. Xaden gets to Erasia, and him and Violet, we're on the same page. Though new rules dropped, she is not allowed to touch him and has to set out daggers in case she needs to kill him during it. That night, they both wake up from a nightmare. It's the same one she's had since Resin, since the first book. It's near Drathis, there's a battle happening, she can't get to Andarna. But apparently this is the first time she's ever told Xaden about this dream? Okay. I would have thought that came up, but because as she's explaining it, his jaw is on the floor. Xaden has been having that exact dream since Resin. But for him, it wasn't a dream, and those are the final moments before he turned Venin. In this dream, the sage always asks Violet, who we now know is Xaden, for an item. That item is Violet. The sage wanted her. And here's the kicker. They aren't just sharing dreams. This is Violet's second signet. She is a dream walker, which is a form of intrinsic. So yes, she can't tell anybody, or she will also be... This is even more dangerous than Xaden's form of intrinsicness, because no one can shield while dreaming. Why does she have this? Your signet is based on what you need at the time. And Andarna was in the dreamless sleep, and all Violet wanted to do was talk to her. This signet is benign in nature, the way Andarna created it for her, how it came to be. But this is even more dangerous than lightning, exactly as the Irids said. Violet is like, no, this cannot be. But then she thinks of another dream that she had. One that was mentioned earlier in this book, where family portraits are burning, and she tells Kat that she needs to marry Xaden to be the heir of the throne. We find out that that dream was Marin's dream, and Violet immediately goes to Marin to confirm, even though she just found out that this could get her killed. She just kind of shows up and she's like, hey, do you have a family portrait? Was it in a fire? Long story short, Marin does have a family portrait, and she's always been afraid she would lose it in a fire. Quote, she says, "It was my worst nightmare," until they actually died, because they are dead now. I think Violet can see people's worst nightmare. That sounds bad. Bad people should not do that. Sounds like you could get up to trouble with that. But there is no time to talk now because they are under attack. Everyone is frantic, they are strategizing and giving motivational speeches. Xaden tells Bodhi, his cousin, he must stay in the house safe because he's the heir. And Auric tells Violet that she must defend Dune's temple. Then he leans in and whispers, "It is how you save Tyrandor." But she completely blows him off. This foreboding, ominous message. We'll just say she's under a lot of stress. This attack that they're under is evident that the Venin really know what they're doing. Someone escaped Basgiath. Someone who is among us, okay? There is a wolf among us. Escaped and told the Venin. My bet is on Imogen. We already know that she has an orange dragon. But she also has pink hair. Pink hair that she is constantly dyeing, and the book makes sure to tell us that. It's almost like she doesn't want us to see her roots. They take to the skies and they're fighting mid-air. Taryn does a roll up there and Violet throws up. When all of a sudden, Violet looks down and Andarna is on the ground near Dune's temple. I mean, if she's not going to listen to Auric, I'm glad somebody will. Andarna says that she just knows it was important, and she's an extension of Violet, even though she's not supposed to be out and fighting. And she hasn't come out of her room in like 4 weeks. But she's making a stand. This forces Taryn and Violet to land there. But there's no time to leave. This is where they are fighting. It's almost like forces conspired to bring them here, Auric. And Violet raises her hand to encircle the area with a protective storm when she hears a voice behind her. "Lift a blade or a hand to wield and I'll kill you all." Am I supposed to hate Theophany because this diva is really working for me? Theophany tells Violet if she comes with her, everyone else can live. And then she like rolls her eyes and she's like, "Ugh, aren't you getting tired of this? I have soup on." One of the Dune priestesses behind Violet points to Theophany and says, "You are not welcome here, heretic." And it clicks that Theophany was a priestess of Dune. My theory was correct. That is when 2 more Venin walk out behind Theophany and fighting ensues. Andarna breathes fire on Theophany and it doesn't affect her. Theophany says marvelous and starts to take in Andarna when she is cut off by looking behind Violet, widening her eyes, and then telling her Venin friends to hightail it out of there. And now she's fleeing. And in the distance, Violet sees Wyvern just dropping out of the sky. One of said Wyvern falls and skids into the temple. It hits a pillar and rock starts to explode outwards when it is caught by shadows. Xaden walks into the scene and tells everyone that that surge of magic that knocked the wyverns from the sky and made Theophany flee was the ward stone being powered. But that would not be possible without the Irids. Leothin! I thought it was necessary to fire your stone. If the Irids did fire the stone, Tyrandor is safe. But was it too easy? Our group thanks Leothan for what he did, and he tells them that he didn't do it for them, but did it for Andarna. He tells Andarna he doesn't think it is too late for her, and shares that they are family. Not her dad, but from the same den. Then he asks everyone to leave so he can have a private meeting with Violet and Andarna. Taryn and Sigale begrudgingly do this, and when they are alone, Leothan says that Andarna can come with him to train for a few years. He invites Andarna to come home and learn their ways. Andarna's immediate reaction is that she can't leave Violet, but Leothan says that Violet is now safe behind the wards and that Andarna can break the bond. No other rider even has two bonds, and she's only able to do that because Andarna made it so. The Irids have some sort of mysterious ability to bend bonds to their will. And Violet can tell that Andarna wants to go, and she is only holding her back. In an act of selflessness, Violet tells Andarna that she wants her to thrive, even if it's not with her. And that permission makes Andarna snap the bond and fly to the sky with Leothan. I'm gonna cry again. This is something that normally kills riders. No one in history has ever survived the loss of their dragon, except for Jack Barlow, who was a Venin at the time, so a bit different. Violet feels like she's dying, and Taryn immediately comes to her rescue and fills her with strength and says, "You will live, you will breathe." Taryn and Sigale are angry and sad and tell Violet that even though she left, we remain. It's definitely the most emotional part of the book, but also I can't seem to accept that this is real. Maybe I'm just in denial, but I feel like this is not the last that we will see of Andarna because we know that she can come back. Violet falls into a deep sadness during the following days. And Taryn is so overly supportive and open. He has left his shields down 24/7, so Violet always has access to him. So Violet hears him speaking to the other dragons, fighting with Sigale, tending to his other dragon matters, and I think that's really endearing. It's an awkward time because everyone is celebrating that the wards are working and they're safe. So Violet's friends are like laughing and happy and then come into her room and immediately go quiet and try to support her. But the difference of what is happening in Violet's head compared to the rest of the world is very profound at this moment. After days of this, Mira arrives to get Violet out of her grief and tells her that she will not lose her to this. Brennan and Xaden arrive and start filling her in on what has transpired in the time she's been down, which is mainly how Tyrrendor opened its borders and they are having a large amount of refugees enter. Vi and Xaden leave for a moment so she can take a bath, and during that time, Mira and Brennan have a conversation about Grandma Niara, which quickly escalates to a fight, as Mira shares with him that she believes that Violet was dedicated to Dune, and he cannot fathom that. Mira's heard Grandma Niara's side of the story about the falling out with her and Violet's parents, but Brennan and we have not. Violet enters and confirms that yes, she was dedicated to Dune. Overhearing what Mira had to say, in addition to what happened in Umbriel, she concludes that it happened there, and also her dad took her to get it done. There is an unrecovered correspondence at the beginning of this chapter with Mama Sorengale that says, "Asher just returned from having it done. No one can find out, but I don't think I can forgive what he did to her." So putting the pieces together, that's what happened. though we aren't sure exactly why and what the repercussions of that will be. It sounds like it has something to do with being a dark wielder and turning, and this conversation prompts Xaden to just be like, I'm a dark wielder. It kind of comes out of nowhere, but I feel like he was just like bubbling up. Mira immediately pulls a knife on him, tells Violet that Xaden will kill her. Violet says, no, we'd never hurt anybody. And then Brennan is like, And then Mira is like, you knew? So poor Mira says, you taught her well, Brennan, and storms out of the room. Mira has been lied to by both siblings. Massive lies. Brennan pretended to be dead for years. And now Violet holding this from her, she's just devastated, and I really empathize with that. When she leaves, Xaden says she won't tell anyone, meaning he read her mind. And I can't help but think how he would react if he found something different in there. And just when we think things couldn't get worse, Navarre may declare war on Tyrrendor for opening its borders. Tyrrendor is interesting because it's the biggest province in Navarre. They also produce a special ore called Talidium, which the rest of Navarre uses. And right now, Xaden has stopped the flow of Talidium as a power move to Navarre, showing them they need him more than he needs them. But the king is really mad, and there are soldiers stationed at the border to Tyrrendor, so when they get the green flag, they can just march in. Xaden also starts taking steps for Bodhi, his cousin, to take over once it's time for him to resign. Violet and Bodhi are both not happy about this, but again, I think Xaden is doing what needs to be done. That night, Violet goes into Xaden's dream again, but this time they both have awareness that she is in his dream and he knows she's there. And the sage calls her a dream walker. And I can't help but wonder if the sage is a dream walker, and that is how he's been making Xaden and Violet dream this dream for months. I also wonder what is the level of harm you could inflict on someone within a dream. It's also important to note that this is the signet Andarna gave her, and she still has it, even though Andarna is gone, which is another hope I have that Andarna is not really gone and is coming back. I feel like she has a plan to go to the Irids and convince them to come home after she works her little Andarna charm on them. And we're going to get a really powerful scene of her and all of them showing up to fight at a critical moment. In the morning, they hear knock, knock, knock. Garrick is at their door, and he looks terrible. He is covered in blood and tells us that Theophany attacked his unit and kidnapped Mira and Tiny. She wants them to know that she is at the wall in Drathis and needs Violet and the brother to report in 5 hours or she will kill them both. This could not have come at a worse time. Not only is there fighting on the front lines, the refugees are going through a mountain pass that is very hard to defend and is in Wyvern Venom territory, so they're being attacked. Tyrrendor and Navarre don't have enough support for these 3 missions, the refugees, front lines, and Mira. And unfortunately, they will have to choose who to save, what objective to prioritize. They call an emergency meeting to strategize, and Brennan tells Violet that she has to pick one. Melgren already decreed that the battle for Mira is a defeat, and he has never been wrong. So that's foreboding. Violet decides that she will save Mira, and Brennan and Violet think this is a good strategy because Violet always picks everyone above herself, and I don't think so. This whole book, Xaden has been like, I'm afraid I'm gonna actually kill people, and she's like, that's okay. You'd never hurt a fly. I know you're like turning into a monster, but just stay around. Don't take any precautions. And I'm not saying she hasn't done selfless things, you know. She puts herself in front of Indarna in the first book. Love that. She's had her moments. But in this meeting, it's discussed like Violet is the most selfless person on the planet, and she always puts other people first, and that just highly conflicts with how she's handled this Xaden situation, and it really bothers me. But they think that this will really surprise Theophany that Violet is coming to get her sister. I don't know. They go there. Theophany is not surprised. On the way there, she sees Auric and his dragon flying in the opposite direction, and she's just like, that's weird, and she doesn't really think too much about it. This is another point for him potentially being a traitor. Our group arrives on the scene, and there are dozens of wyvern. Their army outnumbers ours many to one. Poor Tiny is chained to them, like one of them is chained to his leg, one of them is chained to his wing, and he is thrashing and covered in blood. Theophany is in the center with a blade to Mira's throat and one to her ribs, and Mira's face is like really messed up. She was getting beat up by Theophany. This fills our group with rage, and they say things like, she will die for this, how dare she? Roaring and ready to go, our group dismounts and walks towards Theophany, ready to save her sister. I'm here, just like you asked, Violet says as she dismounts and walks onto the field. Accompanying her are Xaden, Brennan, and Bodhi. Classic kind of scene, Mira with a knife to her throat is crushed. No! Violet, you weren't supposed to come. Because Theophany said brothers, Violet brought Brennan and Bodhi. But she actually wanted Jack Barlow, brothers in venonness, and is disappointed he's not there. They rush to get Jack there, and when he arrives, Violet says, okay, I'm here, he's here. Now give Mira and Tiny back. And Theophany tells us that Violet will be turning in just a few minutes. And then she says, that wasn't the deal. I said I'd let Drathis stand, not that your sister would live. The first thing you should know about us is we're good with our words. The second, we also lie. Then she takes her blade and slices it across Mira's throat. You cannot be dead, girl! I know I said Theophany was a diva and that I liked her, but I take it back. There's blood everywhere, but hopefully she's not dead, right? Right? Everyone responds at the same time. Theophany throws a dagger at Jack, and now there's a lot happening. Xaden hits Theophany with shadows, they bounce off, and Violet sprints towards her daggers in hand, but not before her wyvern can pluck her up from the ground. And then Violet is at Mira, who collapses to the ground. Violet presses her hand to the wound, but it feels like she only has seconds. Yes, I need you right now. Get in here for emotional support. Brennan gets to her. You will live, you hear me? And sweat immediately starts to bead on his forehead. She goes limp, but she's still breathing. But Brennan has never healed anything this extreme. No one has. You can't have her, Violet whispers up to Malik, and the clouds darken. There's too much damage, he says. There isn't, she argues. Cut to the battlefield, where the dragons are taking down a huge amount of wyvern. When Dane flies in, he's here because Sloane flew here, who was not supposed to, and she's in his squad. Sloane has a scroll in her pocket, which she runs to Violet and says, Auric said you would need this. Dane lifts his sleeve and instructs Sloane to drain from him and give to Mira. If he dies, you already knew I was a Dane apologist, and you bitches are gonna be real sorry that you treated him so bad. Sloane wraps her fingers around Dane's wrist and her eyes flare. Someone like you shouldn't have this much power. Good thing for Mira I do. Now put your other hand on Brennan. She says, I'm going to hurt you. And he says, Gods, do I know it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dane Atos. Mira is stable. They also have to get Tiny out, and the only being who's able to do that is Tairn. So he begrudgingly leaves Violet to return him to safety, and everyone else goes to their assigned positions to fight the battle that is also going on. Xaden and Violet part, don't turn and don't die, and we are alone with her. And in her hands, she has the mysterious scroll Auric sent, and it is sealed with the emblem to Dune. Her plan is just to wait for Theophany to come back, because she wants her, and Violet doesn't want to go anywhere else that would put other people in danger. And before we know it, she returns, and Violet doesn't have access to Tairn's power. During this time, she's with Bodhi, and they're talking about some sort of secret plan they may be scheming, which I hope Theophany didn't overhear. Are you ready to tip the scales, Violet? Because she wants her on her side, so the Venin are, overpowered. I'm ready to kill you! Dagger. Theophany waves and it goes flying. Disappointing. But don't be embarrassed. We'll work on it. I'll mentor you. Back to being a diva. Although minus diva points for almost taking out Mira. Theophany starts talking about a he who is waiting, and it's not that other guy who's basically the male version of Theophany. Some big bad. Who do you work for? It feels weird Bodhi is here for this conversation. I'm getting traitor vibes. Oh, Bodhi is there because he can counter signets. I still think it's suspicious though. And it's go time. We've got 2 lightning wielders in the ring. There's a storm a brewing. Wait a damn minute, wait a damn minute. The temperature and humidity rise in a way I've only felt with one other person. Who? Theophany is not a lightning wielder. It is just a byproduct of her real signet. She isn't the dark wielder version of me. She is the dark wielder version of my mother. Violet has prepared for the wrong fight, because Mama Sorengale was unstoppable. Wind wielders couldn't mute it, only when her dragon was exhausted and she didn't have access to his powers. Bodhi can't counter her. Violet has to go now. Bodhi's dragon, Cure, just picks him up and flies out of there. That seems like a bad sign, right? So now Violet is alone. With her power, Theophany can just rip giant trees out of the ground and throw them at Violet. It's like concentrated storm wind. Violet starts throwing rocks at Theophany, and she's like, have you not learned anything? Just drain and you can come with me. We'll be done with this. Apparently it wasn't a rock because it exploded. Maybe she put a rune into it? Regardless, Theophany is flying through the air. And now Violet is charging her with a dagger. Theophany kind of catches her and shakes her. Enough! Violet takes a second blade and stabs her in the thigh. And now Theophany's got Violet by the neck. And she knees her in the stomach. Foolish woman! Your mother knew at your age that she was no match for me, and that's why she hid behind the wards. Perhaps you should have listened to her example. And then she turns Violet's head to the side to watch a bunch of wyvern fly towards the pass the refugees are on. You can still save them. Drain. I definitely think she should have read that suspicious letter provided to her by Auric. Again, Violet with the clues. This feels like a clue. Now wait a minute. Theophany is pushing a blade to Violet's throat, and then Violet just stabs herself. There's more to the plan, right? There is no time to see, because we cut to a Rhiannon chapter. Rebecca. She's in battle, specifically overseeing the refugees and fighting off the wyverns. Our team hasn't taken too many losses. They had a little bit of a lull in fighting when the storm came, but now there are 17 wyvern on the horizon. Rhiannon is a wing leader, so she's commanding all of the soldiers here and also having a conversation with her dragon, Fierg. Sawyer is here fighting, and I'm so proud of him. He does a cool move where his dragon puts him near a wyvern and he just gets it. Rhiannon also saw Tarn fly away without Violet, so knows that she's alone and is thinking a lot about her friend. And so am I, girl. What is going on over there? We're back to Violet, and she thinks her best bet is to threaten Theophany. Well, she has a blade to her throat. Interesting strategy. She tells her to do her worst, and she's happy to meet Malik with her soul intact, because her friends will keep fighting forever. From this position, Violet is able to slam her head into Theophany's face. Theophany reacts by saying shit, which is so funny and casual, and then she teleports 25 feet away. Then she says that's never going to straighten out. And I don't think she means her nose, but I don't know what else she could mean. Theophany is interesting because she's just a girl, an evil girl. But I support women's rights and wrongs. And things are heating up. Theophany seems way more apt to just kill Violet now that she's lost her Irid. But what did she want Andarna for? Violet is thinking about Xaden in the distance fighting at Drathis, and Theophany tells her that he can no longer feel love, and her kind are great actors. She says the only way Violet can have forever with Xaden is by turning. Theophany starts explaining how draining magic works, specifically how she can just put her hand on the ground and drain outwards in a tidal wave. And if you're standing on ground that she does that to, you will die. Unless you drain the ground first and it creates a barrier. She says lesson 1 and puts her hand to the ground and it spreads towards Violet. Violet just took off running. Fair. Clever. She was heading to a wyvern who are essentially made out of drained magic, and she just leaps onto its corpse. In that moment, a claw picks her up. Tarn? Not quite. It's Sigale. And then she says, "You are an inconvenience for which there is no adequate measurement." Sigale needs to get back to Xaden, so she throws Violet at Tarn midair and he catches her. With Tarn, they head to take out a group of wyvern Theophany has placed between them, including one that is bigger than Tarn. That one belongs to Theophany herself. Using Violet's wielding and Tarn's brute strength, they start to take them out. At this moment, the storm Theophany wields is starting to get really, really bad, so there's a mass order to ground the dragons. At the same time, Arik left to retrieve the soldiers from Zelna, a group they recruited in the Southern Isles. So it looks like he was not being suspicious. But Violet still needs to read that dang letter. Then we cut to a POV from Imogen, who is at Drathis, fighting in the city. And I gotta say, I don't think she's the betrayer anymore after hearing her thoughts. Unless she's lying to me and she's an unreliable narrator. Why are you dyeing your hair? Explain that. Regardless, she's mad because Bodhi flew into town, even though he's not supposed to. And she can't fathom Xaden and Bodhi dying and then some Navarian aristocrat taking over Tyrandor, which would mean then 2 generations rebelled and died to fight for. These chapters are cool because they give insight into other characters, their dragons, and the relationships between them. Her dragon's name is Ghislaine, and they are counting how many wyvern they take out. They're very physical scenes to explain the fighting and a deeper look at the military component of the series. It is really not looking good. Dragons are dying. and she just hopes that Violet can stop Theophany and stop the storm. Her girlfriend Quinn is located on a tower that's being really heavily attacked, so she is going to go there even though it's not where she's supposed to be. She can't fathom losing her. When she gets there, she's running and Dane comes up on her right. The two of them attack a dark wielder together. Imogen might have a second signet. She just turned leather to stone, which she used to block the dark wielder from hitting them. Dane's able to take him out, and now the two of them are taking out multiple in this tower. She reaches Quinn, and it's too late. She has just been hit by a dagger between the chest. Quinn just says, "Did they make it?" On the way here, she encountered a bunch of women and children, and they kind of alluded to someone still being up there. And it wasn't because someone got left behind, it was because she sacrificed herself to save them all. Sacrifice in any capacity will do me in. Imogen tells her that she got them out, and she says, "Good." We get like a supercut of Imogen reflecting on the memories she's had with Quinn. These two are best friends and walked the parapet together, where Imogen went first, and Quinn tells her from, "I'm gonna cry." And Quinn tells her, "Look at us, from the parapet to Malik's door. I'm sorry, I have to go first this time." Rebecca! Just before they cross the parapet, Quinn was like, "Nice to meet you, I'm Quinn, we should be friends." And Imogen was like, "You know, we're about to walk the bridge of death, right?" And Quinn was like, "Yeah, it could be a short friendship, but we'll make it a good one." And her last words, "Rebecca, you cannot keep doing this to me," are, "We made it a good one." Garrick is the one to find them, and it's a really sweet moment, but they have to leave immediately. And neither one of them want to leave her body, so he world walks to a safe place to put her body, and then the two of them leave to fight once more. It is a really brutal scene. You can really see the damage that has happened to the city. There's a lot of losses. There's people and dragons littering the streets, and they both think, if Violet doesn't stop Theophany, all of this was for nothing. Auric, you rascal! Unrecovered correspondence from a priestess of Dune to Auric. A gift from one servant of Dune to another. I must warn you, only those touched by the gods should wield their wrath. Her path is still not set. We're back to Violet, and she knows that there is virtually no chance she will win. Part of her just wants to flee, but if she does that, everyone else will die. So she might as well just go with them. Something miraculous will have to happen in order for them to make it out alive. Since I just have a little bit left, I'm going to do my theories for the end of this book, which would be Violet's connection to Dune is going to save them all. Dune is likely going to be on page. The gods are physically real in this world. And I think Xaden is probably going to run away because he does not want to hurt anyone, and I think that is fair. And it is likely only a matter of time for him, and that is heartbreaking. But he has been arranging for things to be okay with him gone, and I think Andarna and the Irids are coming back. I also feel like Violet might just get kidnapped. Theophany's been saying she's gonna kidnap her. This seems like the time. Let's see if I'm right. Taryn and Violet are chasing Theophany on her giant wyvern who rivals Taryn. And it's like every 10 feet she misses Theophany with a strike. And Taryn is biting at the wyvern in front of him, but they just can't catch up. They're not good enough. Theophany is just a little bit better in every area. But would you look at that? The storm is fading, which is not a good thing. Theophany is doing it on purpose, creating a sunny day and making it harder for Violet to wield. And this is making Violet near burnout. This whole time, Xaden has had his shields up so they don't talk and distract each other. And we just heard Taryn bellow, Sigale, no. When at the same time, a giant net of sorts with giant weights attached to it falls on top of Taryn. Is this the kidnapping? I know I said it would be fun, but I take it back. Taryn can't fly like this, and they are just dropping to the ground. You have been the gift of my life, I tell Taryn. It's not over. They're like rolling down this mountain, but it's going better. And Violet thinks, holy shit, we might survive. And Taryn is like, of course we will! And then Theophany and her wyvern climb down to the field because they are pinned exactly where she wants them to be. Violet takes destructive runes and puts them all over the net, and it starts working. They're hoping to free themselves before she arrives. This is also the time that Violet has decided to finally read the message from Auric. It says, for when you lose yours, strike in the dark, Violet. If she only would have looked at this earlier. Somehow, she is super surprised by this, and the fall broke the seal and it unrolls, and within it is a carved piece of gray metal that looks very ceremonial in nature. I am liking this, but also Violet when she sees anything. Violet when she sees a clue. Violet when she's handed the answer. Violet when she sees red flags. Within the note is also the unrecovered correspondence from the High Priestess to Auric. Violet slides down Taryn's leg as he continues to free himself, and Theophany walks over, brought low with a net. How easy it was to catch the pair of you, meaning she has Sigale and Xaden too. In hopes of knocking her off her game, Violet says to Theophany, do you not yearn for the temple in Umbriel? At first, this does make her sad, but then fills her with rage. Do you? Having only been touched but not dedicated? Violet then asks, if you were a high priestess, you must have been powerful on the Isle. How was that not enough for you? And Theophany hits us with a classic banger. Why serve a god when you can become one? At this moment, back towards the city, Sigale bellows. Violet shouts, don't, down the bond towards Xaden. And Drathis, the city in the distance, explodes with shadows. Wyvern cry out, and Theophany turns, what? Towards the noise. Shadow spreads like a ripple on a lake, devouring the fields in a fury of Onyx Storm. Shadows throw Theophany to the ground just before it reaches Violet. Everything is dark, and Taryn says, strike. Then Violet thinks, strike in the darkness. That's what Auric's note says. It's like he knew this would happen. And then it all clicks. More than just this moment. There have been many times throughout this story that Auric has done things, like telling her to go to Dune's temple. It's how you save us. This is because Auric is a precog, a type of signet where you have true precognition. And not like Melgren, who's only able to see the outcomes of battles, someone who can see it all. and orchestrated that dagger to be a broken off piece of the temple of Dune that Theophany cannot step inside. Knowing what she has to do, Violet surges forward. Theophany recoils and hits an invisible wall. Not a wall, a dragon. She came back. Andarna. Just like that, Violet's thundering heartbeat stabilizes. Irid, Theophany says, whispering with reverence towards Andarna. But before she can act, Violet plunges the dagger into her heart, and at first she laughs, but then she sees the blood. She asks how. Stone shouldn't be able to kill venom, but she was never all venom, and Dune is a wrathful goddess to high priestesses who turn her back on her. Before passing out, the last thing Violet hears is Andarna. Cut to Xaden's perspective. I got excited, but then I realized what's probably happened. He's in a very similar situation, but instead of Theophany, it is Berwyn, the male venom that caused him to drain the first time. Sgaeyl is also under a net and injured a lot more than Tairn. And Panchek is there because he turned venom. Panchek yells to the sages, "This is not what we agreed to." Berwyn then kills a dragon with a dagger, which should not be possible, and tells Xaden, "I hope you watched because that is what's going to happen to yours." The biggest mystery of this scene regards a new brother, an unnamed character that has turned venom alongside Xaden. In the scene, he puts himself between Xaden and Sgaeyl. Xaden says, and I quote, "He's a problem. Not because he's more lethal, not even because he's supposed to be dead, but because I can't kill him. I could no more raise a blade to his throat than Violet. The bond between Violet and me is the kind of magic that has no explanation. The bond between Berwyn and me is one that should never exist. And now that my sage has another sibling he can use against me, I'm screwed." Sgaeyl is begging Xaden not to lose himself, but he will not let her die at any cost. In my final act of resistance, I become the very thing I despise, and it's good that I can't feel a damn thing. Sgaeyl begs Xaden to not do this and save her, but it is too late. My soul departs like pieces of ash in a fire, flaking free and drifting away as the shadows envelop everything. Xaden kind of becomes the shadow and enacts these things. He puts daggers into people, he takes Wyvern out of the sky, and the pieces of him that remain beg for him to save them. His friends, family, Violet, those that he loves, before everything is gone, and he won't be able to differentiate. He is everywhere all at once and shreds the net that ensnares Sgaeyl. It's kind of an aerial scene where he looks down at his friends who are cowering in fear or crying and defeats their enemies for them. Xaden, I take back everything I said about you. I'm so sorry this happened. The bond is still kind of intact at this time, and she says, "I love you," and he tries to hold on to that as his soul is splintering and he's losing his connection to himself and everyone he loves. He gets to the field where Violet is and takes down Theophany, and then he lays his shadows over Violet, and he just thinks about how much he loves her, and if he loses that, that will be the last piece anchoring him to this earth. Wow, I didn't expect to get so emotional. His physical body is still with Sgaeyl, and she shakes off the net. She is dripping in blood. He looks at her and asks, "Will you forsake me now?" Sgaeyl lowers her head and says, "What is there left of you to forsake?" He says, "You tell me," and tries to lower his shields so she can be with him. They have a small conversation, basically about whether or not Violet will still love him and if Taryn will let him near her. And Sigale agrees that she will speak to Taryn to describe what happened and let Violet decide. And that will determine their fate. Oof, last chapter. Xaden really doesn't know what he is anymore, or even if he can be inside the wards, which are firing right now and making this area safe, because at least Andarna came back and maybe more Irids. And now he and Sigale are flying to Taryn. We cut to Ryerson House, where Violet is laying on the stones in the courtyard. Brennan says her name and runs over, and Andarna says, "I won't let them burn you." Rebecca's about to do something crazy. Violet asks if Brennan is alright, and he's like, "Am I alright? Are you alright? It's 3 o'clock in the morning." And then the courtyard fills with riders she doesn't recognize. Violet wonders, where have I been? And then Brennan and mysterious riders start to talk about the death roll. The named mysterious rider, Wilson, says we have 5 missing riders. But then Brennan looks at Violet and says 4 now? But then they start to discuss that they know that Xaden did this and the others are probably dead. Violet wonders if this is a dream, but she's sitting next to Imogen, who is very tense. There are also 6 missing eggs from the hatching ground. Violet tries to reach for Taryn, but the bond is foggy, like he's sleeping, and Andarna says that he needs to rest, and she says, "From what?" "He was fine when I last saw him, which was about 5 minutes ago in the woods." Then she remembers Xaden, shadows going everywhere and Theophany dying. "How did I get here? Why is my head so hazy?" Then the riders say, just because she's your sister doesn't mean she's not the fastest way to, and Brennan cuts him off and says dismissed, which we know to bring down Xaden you could kill Violet. Brennan goes over to her and asks her if she's seen Xaden, and she doesn't know. But then Brennan looks down at Violet's finger, and at the same time they all realize she has a gold ring with a giant emerald. It matches the others in the Eurasian blades that Xaden keeps upstairs. "What is happening right now?" Violet asks. "You don't know?" Brennan lowers his voice. Very confused, she flings herself down the bond, but no one is there. When did he put this ring on my hand? But then they notice she also has a letter in her pocket. They open it together, and it is sealed from the Temple of Dune. And it says it is a blessing and legal binding of marriage. Violet says, "To Xaden?" Brennan nods. Violet's eyes flare. "We're married?" She is awestruck and also has no idea how this is possible. After all, she would remember something like that. But within the note, there is another note, and Brennan hands it to Violet. On it are 2 sentences. In Xaden's handwriting, it says, "Don't look for me. It's yours now." Damn. "How long have I been missing?" Violet asks. 12 hours, Brennan replies. My eyes snap to Imogen, with it a deep sense of foreboding. "What did you do?" "What you asked me to." The end. I'm gonna marinate on this and come back to you with my final thoughts. We made it! Gosh, what a ride, and what a long video. A massive thank you to anyone who made it till the end. I hope this was fun for you and made you dig deeper into the book. By this point, it has been out for a while, and I've seen that there's some mixed reviews about Onyx Storm, but I did really enjoy it. The biggest qualm that I see is folks not understanding it and finding it complicated. So if you found yourself in that boat, I hope this video provided some clarity for you. We are left with a lot of questions. Who is this new brother? They are more lethal than Xaden. He cannot kill them for emotional reasons, and they should be dead. The obvious answer feels like Bodhi or Garrick. It makes sense that Violet and Xaden got married if it is Bodhi, because if he turned, obviously he could not be the new Duke. But I feel like that makes too much sense, and Rebecca wouldn't make it that easy for us. Perhaps it'll be much wilder than that. Liam? He's supposed to be dead. But I don't love the idea of bringing back one of the two main characters that have died, especially with Brennan kind of coming back from the grave. We thought he was dead anyway. The new brother could also be Brennan. The word sibling, they're actually siblings now, and that word pretty much is only used by Violet to describe Brennan and Mira. But you're probably thinking, it can't be Brennan. Him and Imogen are in the scene with Violet at the end. The two people that I have suspected since they were introduced. And Imogen just erased all of Violet's memories, and we're just supposed to trust her? If you didn't catch it, that's the ending. Imogen's signet erases memories. I've said since the beginning of this video that I was suspect of Imogen, so this is like the most suspicious ending possible for me. My bets are in, people. Imogen and Brennan cannot be trusted, and they are Team Venom. In the words of Papa Sorengale, only trust Mira. I'm wondering if Berwin is actually Neolin, and also starting to question if the dragons themselves are bad because they channel from the earth. How does that make them any different than Venom? Even though the Irids were assholes, maybe there is something about them rebuking the other dragons. Lastly, Violet's memories being altered at the end had me question if her memories were being altered throughout the whole book. How many times did I say things like this? And I don't know about you, but for someone desperately seeking answers, Violet willfully ignores clues or purposely forgets them. Imogen wasn't with her on the southern continent, so there would need to be a way for her to get there and get back and forth, unless Violet simply wasn't telling us that she was along for some reason. We know that this is specifically through Violet's perspective until it changes. Papa Sorengale was able to get back and forth from the Southern Isles, and he didn't have a dragon, so he couldn't have had a signet and world walk, presumably. So maybe there is a way back and forth quicker than flying? A portal? All I know is that Smarty Pants Violet, I recite the codex for fun, was uncharacteristically a big dummy for several points in this book, and I feel like there's more to that. Leave me your final thoughts and theories down below, and we will continue this conversation in the comments. I really enjoyed making this, and I would love to make more reading vlogs for future fantasy releases, if you enjoy this kind of thing. It took a really long time, and I almost exploded my laptop, so please let me know if you liked this and it is worth making more. If you are into witchy stuff, I have lots of other videos for you to enjoy, and I will be back with something again soon. That is all I have for you. Have a magical rest of your day. I am gonna go enter the dreamless sleep.